Hello everybody, and welcome into my little lore cave for my game, Midnight Dawn of Darkness. In this episode, we're covering the lead up to the greatest war in the history of Valencia, the Dark Moon War, and how a brother of a king single-handedly brought forth the greatest possible power source in soul energy, and furthermore, brought forth the world's greatest downfall, with the unsealing of an ancient demon which carried the moon seed and the last of the old gods trapped inside. This episode will uncover the entire cultist uprising, the historical importance of these events, and how this shaped the world of Valencia so that those wishing to know more about them for their own games and stories, or for those who wish to have more understanding of the lore of Endod's world, Valencia, can get proper clarification of these major historical events. Sit back, enjoy, and grab some hot cocoa and some popcorn as we talk about the rise of Solgar, the Grand Demon of Wrath in Endod. Make sure to like and subscribe for more and join our Discord. Yippee! The mercenary team and the letter. Our story begins in the country of Abano, with a mercenary crew known simply as the Promethean. Ezran, their leader, is sorting through mail when he finds a letter addressed from the neighboring kingdom of Antros, a letter from their royalty. The king is extremely ill, with a poison that they've been struggling to identify. Our mercenary crew, which includes Solgar the First, is happy to oblige to the king's request, seeing as the promised funding is quite large, and could provide for the crew's needs for a long time. Discussion amongst the 12 members of the Promethean leads to some discussion, with some of the group having gripes towards the detective work, declaring it not to be worth the time or funding, and it being out of place for their kind. Yet, at the same time, battling the river Sahagans and Slimes and the occasional bandit on the road doesn't pay nearly as close to what was promised, and after all, the Promethean could also use the renown that could be gained by seeing what was needed, and researching the mystery this poison has created. Alex, the rogue of the group, claims he could figure out what the poison is with a good lead and a closer look. Travel would be far, and as of current, the River Sahagans needed to be handled. The group would prepare their transport via boat towards the capital city of Ornyx within Antros, and in the meantime they would round up a large amount of the town's surrounding monsters for coin and gather a handful of items. Tomorrow would be the great journey, and when tomorrow came, the entirety of the Promethean would set in motion the beginning of the greatest threat Valencia has ever faced. Travels to the castle. As the group awoke the next day, they gathered the last of their belongings and stowed their horses for those who were mounted on the ship, for they still had a far distance to make it into Antros. The boat would be taking roughly a day's journey down the river, with a singular stop about midway to unload some traded goods near Antros' border. The ride was peaceful, calm, and relatively simple, and gave the group a long time to prepare. Osiris, the healer of the group, started to sense a dark presence in the air while on the journey, like something was brewing on the horizon that he wasn't quite sure about. Upon arriving in Ornyx, the group met with King Raren's steward, who, upon the poisoning of Raren, had reached out to many other groups with a similar request, most turning down the offer upon arrival. Osiris, confused as to why this was so, simply asked the steward as to why this happened to be, to which the steward replied that many healers had struggled with it, and that those who had tried to identify the poison considered it to be one of two things: either a poison that was very easily curable, to which an antidote had already been administered with no effect, or a poison with only one known cure. One which would require the acquiring and administering of a curative plant known only to grow on the Draken Isles, a deadly poison that could only be cured by sulfuric parsley roots, of which needed to be processed to the highest degree. The Prometheans seem unbothered by this request, and merely asked that Osiris be able to take a closer look. Upon hearing this, the steward was appeased, and let the group visit Raren while he prepared a gift for them, a sword for Ezran, and enough money to help cover the expenses. Alongside the search to find this cure, however, the king still needed protection in his currently catatonic state. Additionally, if the poisoner was still relatively nearby, the group might be lucky enough to find the perpetrator and an antidote amongst their belongings. So, before going through the colored ways and trying to get any sort of passage to the islands, when doing so could require up to months or even a year's worth of work, they performed a stakeout for whoever would have targeted Onyx and her people. While in town, the group searched for as many clues as they could find, many of the members possibly slacking, while Ezran searched with Osiris and Alex to find as many clues as they could, before eventually making their way to the Temple of Solvari within the capital. Solgar, with his time, decided he must wrestle a giant catfish in the waters as fishing, and then would turn its image into a wooden sleeping cask for some reason. But I digress. The group would eventually make their way to this temple all the same. It's here that they saw the crystal arch in which Angara Thog, thousands of years prior, had helped trap a demon within that had been plaguing this land and had raised hell for many a man thousands of years prior. Thogar, being one of her descendants, was reverent here, and while the group examined the monument, prayed to his ancestors. As the members of the Promethean crossed under the arch, they saw the sky turn black as night, and the flying dragon overhead swapped from Solvari to Darvanis, as if the evil that was trapped within this arch reeked from it and seeped into this world around it. As the group overviewed its workings and discussed with the head priest, they'd learnt more of Raren and his family, and of Gilbert, the brother of the king who had been serving here for quite some time. However, he had recently disappeared, which left the church concerned and worried for their brother in alms. As they walked through the temple, discussing with the priest, they found their way to an upper balcony, where upon some further investigation, they noticed a part of the keystone for the arch had been hollowed out, almost bored into. When mentioned to the priest, he looked very concerned, terrified of what that meant. The binding seal on Solgar had been taken, and if nothing was done, whoever took the sealing stone could resurrect the trapped demon. Solgar, the grand demon who had been sealed within for so long, could be resurrected and rain hell on Valencia yet again. The mystery of the Priameno. The group would grant their works to the church so as to track down and stop this demonic threat, specifically at the request of Thogar, who felt it a necessity that he return this monument of his ancestors' work to its proper state, and requested that they find a way to seal the demon or kill it. The group was hesitant at first, but it was finally agreed upon. Meanwhile, Alex had been doing some spying on some districts within the town, searching for any areas that seemed slightly off. While snooping around the neighborhoods, he himself would get captured and dragged to a theater within the outer districts, known as the Priameno. The Priameno's ringleader, with the help of his men, would threaten Alex, noting his appearance as part of the Promethean, and make a deal for Alex's life. Alex would need to become a mole in the Promethean's forces, driving them away from the Priameno's trail, or else they would find and slaughter him. With his life on the line, Alex cunningly agrees to this plot to save his life, and eventually attempts to turn the tables on his captors so as to cause no issues. He agrees to never explicitly point the group towards the Priameno, understanding deep down that this group must be part of whatever scheming occurred to poison the king. Upon being free to return to the Promethean, however, Alex instead decides to stay and snoop for himself, masterfully weaving himself through the troops' prying eyes in an attempt to find the antidote to the poison. And instead, however, he finds a note, explaining that the king is to be sacrificed alive at a certain date 3 weeks from now, so as to resurrect Solgar and exploit the demon into granting power. This note, he noticed, was signed by Gilbert, the king's brother. However, Alex, not having the same knowledge as the others, simply marked his name on the list of suspects. Additionally, as the members of the troop grew restless, Alex didn't have much time for any other note-taking, and took what info he had and ran, away from the theater, back to his mercenary friends at nightfall. Knowing that the Priameno had eyes on them, he discreetly left his notes of his findings and plights within Ezran's quarters, whereupon the next day, he would deploy the Promethean without Alex so as to keep the rogue safe. The Priamata would later that day be killed upon their lethal resistance to the arrest, and with Promethean shortly after learning about the info that Alex had found. Upon further search, they found an unbelievably cryptic note, encoded in such a way that it wasn't decipherable to any of the members, even Alex. And with the king's life on the line, they knew they needed to find the antidote quickly. And it was then that the fog settled in. The fog sets in. The tundras of Antros are known for their weather at almost any time of year, but a fog like what had started to settle in was almost something unheard of. Almost, except for in legend. You see, in the past when Solgar was let loose, his power irradiated a fog which blurred the lines between Nilvoy, the demon realm, and Elincier. This power irradiating from him brought forth the rest of the armies of Wrath, of which he was their leader, and allowed him to bring forth destruction with ease, blinding those who stood to resist with the thick fog as he approached. The Promethean innately understood that when the weather turned sour, they were on a time limit. They needed to stop the sacrifice before it happened, and fast, lest they expedite the event with the Priamata's front now destroyed. As such, they were looking for any possible chance they could at getting the cure. And as they discussed with the steward of the castle, they learned that the Blue Knight, the leader of the Way of Blue, was supposed to be making his yearly rounds into Mindseer, a nearby country of which Antros was at truce with, from a war long past. A war in which wounds hadn't yet fully healed, and from which Mindseer and Antros were still at odds with. The mercenary group wouldn't be welcome while under duty, even if they were wearing their home country of Abano's crest, as Abano had sided with Antros during the aforementioned war. It meant that they would need to cross in Mindseer quietly, search for the Blue Knight as he made his way to the capital of Dunganon, and rush quickly with him in tow towards Ornyx with hope at enough time to complete whatever additional preparations needed to occur to administer the curative, all while under the strict time limit of 3 weeks at most, with the possibility that the king could be stolen at any time, if the watch was not kept. So Ezran requested soldiers to be kept on guard at all times around Marin, to hopefully buy them the time while the Promethean traveled into the heart of Mindseer, and found the Blue Knight with hopes that one amongst the Colored Ways ranks happened to have the curative on them. They prepared a boat immediately to sail the border, as the fog thickened. But the boat ride was attacked with imps and demons the whole way, just as the legends had foretold when Solgar's fog had been unleashed prior. It was luck that they made it to the other side of the waters. Blue Knight Liam. Liam awoke in the middle of the night to the call of one of his men sounding an alarm. Attacked! In the middle of the woods. The air was thick and cold, and yet the man was used to this. As he erupted forth from the tent, he took Conrine's claw with him, the lance that signified his position as the Way of Blue's colored knight. In the dark, foggy night, it was hard to see anything, but they were being assailed by demons and imps of all different sorts, something the knight wasn't at ease with. Something was wrong, and Liam needed to get to the bottom of it. Liam would slay the beast with an almost effortless ease, encapsulating all that stood in his way in a solid block of ice. Their leader stood little to no chance to Liam's might, and the knight would thank the man who sounded the alarm and kept the 5 men of the Way of Blue safe that day. Liam, after the group had been riled up from the fight, would calm the other members, stating that they needed to go do their duties in Mindseer and question the origin of these demons they had slain. With the blessing of Conrine, they sanctified the ground where the demons now laid, in hopes of reducing their numbers that would follow them. They then rode onwards to Dunganon, as the fog raced forth with them. Later that same day, the Promethean would run through the same campsite, seeing the bodies stacked of demons and blocks of ice of those unfortunate to stand in Liam's way. They knew that they were on the right trail, and continued their march, in hopes to catch the Blue Knight before he entered Dunganon. Sadly, as they rode towards Dunganon, they never found the knight, only inevitably reaching the city, with a parade of which to celebrate the arrival of Liam already underway. As Liam marched down the streets of Dunganon, he was on edge. His work here was a quick diplomatic check-in. Simple, easy work of checking what Mindseer's standings within the world was, and move on. He had already been working to commune with Conrine, Solvar, and Darvanis, see what may be causing the demon uprising. and he could swear he was seeing someone out of the corner of his eye running on the rooftops at right this very moment. So he looked, but no one was there. Alex needed to find the opportune moment to get the knight's attention, or else he was going to find himself at the spears of not only one of the most threatening warriors in the world, but also the guards here as well. The solo man for this journey, he needed to get in position well ahead of the parade, in an alley with an open view to the knight. He saw his opening and dived into the alleyway. He looked outward and waited till he was parallel with the knight to get his attention, drawing him over as best as he could. Liam, the kind soul he was, merely saw Alex as a commoner, looking for a blessing, until Alex spoke. Liam understood immediately of the danger the rogue spoke of, having fought it on his way here. He dismissed Alex and told him to wait for this to be done. The quick moment had passed, and they would talk more on the journey. The other members of the Way would be able to process a majority of the smaller tasks. He just merely needed to speak his words with Mindseer's leaders, and then he would join them. And so, Alex returned outside, having stealthed his way into deadly territory, and returned to the group initially empty-handed, but with a few hours passing by, their savior and Liam strode through the gates, and arrived near to their encampment. The real battle was soon to begin. Solgar and the moon. As fast as the horses could carry them, they rode for Antros, with the fog getting so thick it was near impossible to navigate. They arrived at the river where their boat was and set sail in hopes that they weren't too late. When they arrived in Antros, the castle was ransacked, with only the paper trail that they had found with the Priamato leading them outwards towards a cave outside of town, Conrine guiding the knight and the Promethean towards the threat that had threatened mankind. Once in the cave, they found a whole cavalcade of demons and cultists standing forth to protect the ritual that would bring them immense power, or so they thought. Liam and the Promethean were strong and capable, pushing their way through the forces that stood before them until they reached the inner sanctum, where Raren was being sacrificed. 6 cultists stood around the stone altar the king was bound to, a knife in the hand of the 7th, who prepared to finish the ritual and bring forth the Grand Demon of Wrath. The 7th was Gilbert, a man who was tired of his treatment from his brother, a man who had been thrown to the wayside for everything the kingdom had offered, forced to be a monk at a temple with no say in the matters of the wealth or land of Ornyx, and no land to be duke over of his own as family of the king. Gilbert wanted revenge for the life Raren seemed to have stolen from him, and with the cut to open the rift, his revenge had begun. Raren's poison left his blood a thick ooze as it spilt. He wasn't dead, as the ritual required him living, but he wasn't much of a king tied to this altar, either. A whispering wind would enter through the opening in the cave as Liam and the Promethean made it into that final hall. A ghostly figure of Solgar rose from the king's body, beginning to form as blood was spilt from Raren. The demon cackled as his body began to form. Solgar's greatest power in his prime was his ability to draw strength from hatred, battle, and pain. As Wrath's Grand Demon, the general of its forces, he found strength in bloodshed and brutality, in fighting and war. As many beasts and cultists assailed the Promethean, he gathered his strength from the dying souls of men and demons, until his own power was strong enough to throw some of his innate magic into the fray, ripping a cross-shaped hole through the forces, killing Gilbert so that his power would be unmatched. As they battled, the Promethean channeled their forces, taking beatings from the whole manner of creatures that assailed them, and now having realized the problem at hand, just battled to stay alive, while the rivers of bloodshed ripped through the air with Solgar's magic. When Liam finally saw his opportunity to reach up and stop the ritual, he jumped into action, leaping in front of the demon. Even while still being weakened, Solgar felt unthreatened. A single blast would surely kill this miscreant. A single thread of Wrath's true power would swallow him whole where he stood. He channeled his cross-breaking beam of magic towards Liam. A solid wall of rage. Liam's strength was never truly in his attacking force, despite it being amongst his most threatening qualities on the battlefield. It was how evasive and nimble he was when he needed to be. As he saw the tip of the blast burst forth, he weaved through it, as if a bullet had slid through his body without even touching him. The rest was impulse. No words, no thoughts. Just blood from the half-formed ghost of Wrath's general, cutting his lance. Solgar, shocked, still laughed. He raised his arm for another blast, but it wouldn't budge. Ice had swallowed him. He couldn't blink. He couldn't breathe. Trapped in ice, the demon died impaled and half-formed. His grip where he had held that lance as it impacted made his body into a dead weight at the end of Liam's weapon. Liam could hear it, the call of Conrine, and the beating of wings through the skylight. The others heard wing flaps, mountainous wing flaps that shattered the ground. The demons were dispersing, and the cultists left alive were slaughtered with the end of Solgar. And only a few words entered Liam's mind. Give him to me, my child, so he never threatens this land again. It was Conrine flying overhead. With impressive strength, Liam tossed the ice ball that had formed around his lance upwards towards the skylight, into the night air, where Conrine caught it and took it skyward. Solvari and Darvanis soon followed, channeling their might to form a gravitational field as they flew it upward, ice encapsulating it at Conrine's will the entire time. For weeks afterward, you could see the blue dragon swirling around the moon, forming more and more ice around it. Rarin, after being administered the antidote, was fine, merely scarred from the wound left by Gilbert. The Promethean, with agreement from Liam, took arms as a subsect under the Way of Blue, with many members enjoying the change of pace and the more well-mannered lifestyle it brought them to. And when Thargar finally settled down, he had his own kid, who'd grown to study this moon and realize its demonic potential. Potential which would bring forth the true war. With all cards on the table, and with only benefits being seen, who wouldn't take such a tempting offer? To play in the majesty and wonder of this world. A deadly wonder which would change fate itself. With that, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this and like to see more, down in the description is not only going to be a playlist for this series, but a playlist for the campaign I'm running on this channel, Depths of the Blighted Heart. If you'd like to help out or just contribute to the ideas of MDOD, fan art is always welcome and appreciated in the Discord server, also seen below. Leave a comment for any lore you'd like to see covered in the future, or if you're confused about something. I always try to respond to all the comments on every video, so if you would like to know more, ask me there or in my Discord. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye!